My ex-girlfriend is sleeping in my bed every night, but we're definitely broken up. She made that very clear. The bed thing is a logistical arrangement, not a romantic one, and the fact that I have to explain the difference tells you everything about the absurdity of my current domestic situation. Maya and I broke up 6 weeks ago. She sat me down on a Tuesday. She said, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I need space." She said it with the composed precision of someone who had rehearsed the speech in a shower and stress-tested it against imaginary counter-arguments and arrived at a phrasing so airtight that my only available response was okay, followed by silence, followed by the sound of a man's worldview reorganizing itself in real time. We live together. One-bedroom apartment. Both names on the lease. 7 more months. Neither of us can afford to break it. Neither of us can afford a second apartment. She said, "I'll take the couch." The couch is 5 feet long. She is 5'7". She managed for 3 nights. On night 4, she came to the bedroom door at 1 a.m. and said, "The couch has a spring that is attacking my kidney. I need the bed." I said, "Take the bed. I'll take the couch." She said, "The couch will attack your kidney too. The couch is a decorative object that has been pretending to be furniture. Nobody should sleep on it." She said, "We share the bed." She said it practically. The way an engineer proposes a solution to a structural problem. She takes the left side, I take the right. A pillow wall divides the middle like the demilitarized zone of a relationship that has signed a ceasefire but not a peace treaty. Every morning I wake up to Maya's alarm at 6:15. I wake up at 7. For 45 minutes I lie in bed listening to my ex-girlfriend shower, brush her teeth, and move through a morning routine I spent 2 years memorizing and now experience as a daily museum tour of a life I used to participate in and now just observe from a horizontal position. She makes coffee. She makes 2 cups. She sets mine on the nightstand because making 1 cup and not 2 is wasteful. And because the coffee maker makes a minimum of 2 cups. And because she is a person who cannot walk past someone's nightstand without putting something helpful on it, even if the someone is a man she is no longer in love with. The coffee is perfect. She remembers the ratio. She remembers I do not stir. She remembers the mug I prefer, the blue one with the chip on the handle that I will not throw away because she gave it to me on our first anniversary. And throwing away a chipped mug from someone who just broke up with you feels like agreeing with the breakup, and I am not ready to agree. The grocery situation is impossible. We share a Google Doc that still has the heart emoji she put next to ice cream 8 months ago that neither of us has deleted because deleting the heart emoji would require acknowledging that it exists, and acknowledging it means deciding whether it still applies, and deciding means having a conversation. And having a conversation is the thing we are avoiding by sleeping in the same bed and pretending the pillow wall is architecture. We cook dinner together 3 nights a week, not intentionally. We end up at the stove at the same time because we are hungry at the same time because hunger is a habit that does not know about the breakup. She chops, I stir, she seasons, I plate. The choreography lives in our bodies, not in our relationship status, and our bodies did not get the memo. Last week she was chopping onions. She was crying, not about the onions. I know what Maya's onion cry looks like. This was the other cry, the one where the tears are already there and the onions give them permission to fall. I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I'm fine." She said, "I'm fine," with a period at the end that is actually a locked door. I did not push because broken up people do not push through locked doors. My friend Terrence said, "You share a bed, you share groceries, she makes your coffee, you cook together, and nothing is happening." I said, "We are 2 adults in a lease-based cohabitation arrangement who happen to share a mattress and a Google Doc." He said, "That is a marriage. You are describing a marriage." He is not wrong. The arrangement is indistinguishable from a marriage, except that the emotional classification has changed, and the emotional classification is the only thing that is different, and the thing that is different is the one thing we do not discuss, because discussing it would mean acknowledging that the pillow wall is not a wall, the coffee is not wasteful efficiency, the heart emoji is not an oversight, and the reason she cries over onions that are not the reason is the reason we are both pretending does not exist. Tuesday night, 11 p.m., pillow wall in place, lights off. I was on my right side facing the wall. She was on her left side facing the other wall. She said, "Owen." I said, "Yeah?" She said, "The pillow wall fell." The pillows had shifted. The middle of the bed was open. She said, "Should I fix it?" I said, "Do you want to fix it?" She said, "I asked you first." I said, "I asked you second." She said, "I don't want to fix it." I said, "The wall?" She said, "Any of it." I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "I don't know. I just know the wall fell and I don't want to put it back." The pillows were between us. Not a wall anymore, just pillows. In the morning, there were 2 cups of coffee on one nightstand instead of one on each side because she put them both on mine, and she did not explain why. And I did not ask because asking would have meant naming the thing the coffee was saying, and the coffee was saying it just fine on its own. The next morning, I noticed the blue mug, the chip. It was smaller than I remembered, not worn down, filled. Someone had filled the chip with a tiny bead of clear adhesive, smoothed it, nearly invisible unless you are looking. She fixed it. The mug I would not throw away because throwing it away felt like agreeing with the breakup. She fixed the thing I was holding onto as proof that something was broken, which means either she wants me to stop holding on to the broken thing, or she wants me to know that broken things in this apartment get repaired, not replaced. Maya lingered at the counter that morning. Normally she is out by 6:45. She said, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Not "What are you making? What do you want?" She said "we" 3 times in one sentence about plans and did not flinch, did not correct herself. I stood there running my thumb over the spot where the chip used to be. The adhesive was smooth. I added lingering and "what do you want?" and we to a pile I was building in my head. The pile was getting tall enough to see over, but asking the question meant the pile either becomes a foundation or it collapses. And right now, as a pile, it was safe. Terrence said, "She fixed your mug, she stopped putting up the wall, and she's still making you coffee every morning. What are you waiting for? A notarized letter?" He said, "You're not protecting her by staying quiet. You're protecting yourself." He was right. The reason I had not asked Maya what the mug meant, or the wall meant, or the coffee meant was not respect. It was fear. Fear that she would say, "The mug is just glue. The wall fell because pillows shift. The coffee is just coffee." And the pile would collapse and I would be standing in the rubble of evidence that was never evidence at all. That evening, Maya was on the couch with her laptop. She closed it when I walked in, caught fast. She said, "Nothing. Apartments. Apartments." The word hit the air like a brick on tile. She said, "For when the lease is up." I said, "That's 7 months away." She said, "I just just wanted to be prepared. She said, prepared, the way she says, fine, with a locked door behind it. The mug repair, the fallen wall, the 2 coffees on one nightstand. All of it suddenly had a timer. Maya was already browsing the future where the excuse to stay runs out, and the pile of evidence did not feel like a foundation anymore. It felt like sand. Maya started leaving handwritten notes on little pieces of paper torn from the avocado notepad by the fridge. Out of eggs, your jacket is still at the dry cleaner. There's leftover pasta in the blue container. The lid is tricky. Twist left first. A roommate writes, pasta in fridge. Maya wrote twist left first because she was thinking about me standing there with the container in my hands and she wanted to save me from the lid. You do not troubleshoot someone's future frustrations unless you are thinking about them when they are not in the room. I kept every note, folded them into my jacket pocket. I could not throw away her handwriting. Saturday morning, Maya was standing at the stove, mixing bowl, flour, measuring cup. She was making pancakes from scratch. Pancakes on a Saturday morning is not a logistical decision. Pancakes on a Saturday morning is a relationship. It is a person who woke up early and measured flour because someone she cares about likes pancakes and she wants to be the one who makes them. She said, I had extra batter. I said, you made batter from scratch. She said, it's not hard. I said, you measured flour at 8 a.m. on a Saturday for someone you're not in love with. The spatula stopped moving. Her hand froze over the pan. She said, don't do that. I said, do what? She said, don't make it mean something. I said, I'm not making it mean something. I'm asking if it does. She said, eat your pancakes, Owen. They were perfect. Slightly underdone in the center the way I like them, the way I mentioned once over 2 years. She remembered the exact doneness I prefer in a pancake. She remembered the way I like my coffee. She remembered the container lid trick. She remembered everything. You cannot remember everything about a person and call it logistics. You cannot file that under lease-based cohabitation. That is something else. That is the thing we do not name. That afternoon, Maya came out of the bedroom dressed up. A new shirt, earrings. Maya does not wear earrings to go to the store. Earrings are intentional. She said, I'm going out with a friend. She did not say which friend. I sat on the kidney couch. A friend who requires earrings and a new shirt and no details is a specific kind of friend. Terrence said, are you sitting in your apartment spiraling about a woman you won't talk to? Ask her tonight. No more signs, no more mugs, no more reading the coffee leaves, just ask her. Maya came home at 10 p.m. smelling like restaurant food and a perfume I recognized from date nights and the first time she met my parents. She said, it was just dinner with Gracelyn, her old college mentor, the woman she calls when she needs someone to tell her the truth she does not want to hear. Something unclenched in my chest. I hated that I could feel the difference because the difference meant I cared more than a cohabitator should. Then she said quietly, almost to the couch cushion more than to me. I told her about us, the apartment, the bed, the arrangement. I said, what did she say? She said I was being a coward. She stood up. She walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Not a slam, just a sentence with a period. Coward. Gracelyn said she was being a coward, and Maya told me that. She did not have to tell me that. She could have said, dinner was nice, and gone to bed, but she sat on the worst couch in the world and gave me the word coward, like she was handing me a key and hoping I would know which door it opened. She went out to talk about me. She sat across from the person she trusts most and described the bed and the coffee and the mug, and whatever Gracelyn said hit hard enough that she came home and handed me the verdict like a confession. Gracelyn told Maya the same thing Terrence has been telling me, that the arrangement is not an arrangement, it is a hiding place. And 2 people who have never met each other have looked at 2 people who share a bed and a life and a Google Doc with a heart emoji and said the same thing. We are not being careful. We are being cowards. Sunday morning, Maya was still in the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed, holding her mug with both hands, staring at the window. She said, Gracelyn asked me a question last night that I can't stop thinking about. She asked me to describe the difference between how I felt about you when we were together and how I feel about you now. My throat went tight. She said, I couldn't answer. I sat there for 30 seconds and I couldn't think of a single difference. And then I cried into a breadbasket. She said it with a small broken laugh. She still did not look at me. She said, I need to figure something out and I need a few days. Whether I broke us because something was actually wrong or because I was scared something would eventually be wrong and I wanted to leave before it hurt. I said, I've been sleeping next to you for 6 weeks without asking a single real question. I can wait a few more days. She almost smiled. The corner of her mouth moved about a quarter of an inch and stopped. Monday, the coffee was on the counter, not the nightstand. 12 feet of distance placed without a word. She rebuilt the pillow wall, not the full barricade, just one pillow. A bookmark in a story she was not done reading but needed to put down for the night. Tuesday, I came home and knew something was wrong. Maya's jacket was not on the hook. Her laptop was not on the couch. Her shoes were gone, both pairs. My entire body went cold because the absence of shoes in an entryway can tell a whole story. And the story those missing shoes were telling was that she left, that she figured it out, that the answer was the breakup was right and the mug was just glue and the coffee was just coffee and she packed while I was at work. I walked to the bedroom. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her suitcase was on the top shelf, dusty, untouched. She had not left. She was just out. I sat on the bed and breathed, and sitting there, hands on my knees, heart still hammering, staring at a closet full of clothes that were still here, I realized something. The thing I was most afraid of was not that Maya did not love me. It was that she did, that she loved me and she knew it, and she was going to leave anyway because her fear was louder than anything I could say. I could not wait for her to figure it out. I could not sit here reading signs and collecting notes and holding my breath every time her shoes were not by the door. Someone had to say the actual words, not coffee words, not pillow words, real ones. Maya came home at 8 p.m. Her shoes were wet from rain. Her hair was damp. She had been working something out with her feet because her head could not do it alone. She saw me sitting at the table, not the couch, not in bed, the table where we eat meals and have the kind of conversations that require a flat surface and eye contact and the willingness to not leave until something has been said. She said, "You're not going to wait the few days, are you?" I said, "I have been reading coffee mugs and pillow walls and grocery emojis like they're a language, and I'm done being fluent in everything except the thing that actually matters." She sat down. I put the blue mug on the table between us, the repaired one. I said, "You fixed this." She said, "The chip bothered me." I said, "The chip has been there there for 8 months. You fixed it 2 weeks after telling me you're not in love with me. She said, because you wouldn't throw it away, and every time you held it, you ran your thumb over the chip like it was a wound, and I couldn't watch you keep touching something broken when I could fix it. I said, that's not a lease-based cohabitation decision, Maya. She said, I know. I said, I need you to tell me what's actually happening. Not what you rehearsed, not the shower speech, the real thing. She said, my parents stayed together for 22 years. Do you know how many of those years they were actually happy? I said, you've told me. The first 5. She said, and then 17 years of sleeping in the same bed and making coffee and going through the motions because leaving was harder than staying. I watched my mom pour my dad coffee every morning with a face that looked like she was serving a sentence. And I promised myself I would never confuse comfort for love. She said, and then I realized I was comfortable with you. And it terrified me because comfortable was the thing that killed them. I said, so you left before we became them? She said, I left before I could find out. And then I spent 6 weeks sleeping next to you and making your coffee and fixing your mug and crying over onions and looking at apartments I never contacted and leaving a heart emoji on a grocery list I could have edited in 2 seconds, and I realized something. I said, what? She said, my parents' problem was never the coffee. It was never the routine. They stopped talking. They stopped asking hard questions. They stopped being honest. They stayed in silence for 17 years because neither of them had the guts to sit at a table and say the actual words. She wiped her face. She said, I am sitting at the table. I am saying the actual words. She said, I was wrong. The speech was wrong. I am in love with you. I have been in love with you every morning I made that coffee, and every night I lay on my side of that bed, and every time I chose not to fix the Google Doc because fixing it would have meant admitting it was over, and I never, not once, believed it was over. I just believed I was supposed to want it to be over because that's what brave people do. But I wasn't being brave. I was being my mom. I was leaving before I could get hurt, and all I did was hurt both of us for 6 weeks. I said, you said you needed space. She said, I had space. 6 inches of pillows. It was the worst space of my life. I said, Terrence says I'm insane. She said, Gracelyn says I'm a coward. I said, are we really going to let Terrence and Gracelyn be right? She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that cracks something open in the room and lets the air back in. She said, they're both going to be unbearable about this. I reached across the table. I picked up the blue mug and ran my thumb over the place where the chip used to be. I said, you know, you could have just told me. She said, I think I needed to fix the mug first. I needed to know I could repair something before I asked if I could come back. I slid the mug toward her. She took it. I said, the wall stays down. She said, the wall stays down. That night, there was no pillow wall. There was no left side and right side. There was one bed. In the morning, there were 2 cups of coffee on one nightstand and a Google Doc that still had a heart emoji next to ice cream. And for the first time in 6 weeks, neither of us pretended it did not mean what it means.